Good afternoon. My name is Brian Hokelman, and welcome to the Modern Data Protection for Edge Computing webinar. So we'll be talking about pushing workloads to the edge, cost, compliance, and security. And for today's call, we'll be covering off on the speakers and doing those introductions and talking about how we got here, why we're having this discussion today. Talking a little bit more about the basics of edge computing, and then how do you put a data protection or data resiliency plan around it. So that's the agenda that we'll be having today, and it's really not a PowerPoint presentation. It's really an opportunity for us to have a fluid conversation and have some back and forth and get the perspectives of the experts who are on the call. So let's go ahead and meet our presenters. So today, I'm Brian Hokelman. I'm VP of Product and Business Development at OTAVA. I'm also joined by a couple of really excellent guests today. One is Craig Tiriak, and he is the VP of Product Management at Scale Computing. And so he's been there for a very long time and has a very deep wealth of knowledge. And Tim Hudson, who's one of the principal solutions architects at Veeam. So those are your speakers today. So we'll be throwing it around and talking about how we got here and edge computing and how to protect your data. So with that, let's kind of jump into it real quickly. So if you want to just talk about why now, and just to give you a little bit of context on how we all got here, we have a great professional relationship between the three speakers on the call. So OTAVA has been a long-standing Veeam partner, a platinum partner. We're actually North America's Partner of the Year for 2025. So we've been a strong force in advanced data protection. We've been working with Veeam for over a decade. And we also had started to work with scale computing. And in the climate that we're in right now, we see just a lot of people looking at re-architecting their hyperconverged infrastructure, evaluating hypervisors, trying to understand how they have distributed computing for different types of workloads and edge computing. And so we saw a great opportunity to kind of bring everyone together. And we've been working with Craig and Scale Computing for many years, and we were looking to enable them to leverage Veeam replication software. And so that's really the genesis of how these three companies came together and started to work together to develop an edge computing data protection strategy. So as we kind of entered into that journey, we at OTAVA became the strategic distribution partner for Veeam licenses to Scale Computing, obviously a long-standing relationship with Scale Computing and OTAVA as well. And so we're really supplying a lot of those licenses and enabling some of the support aspects of Veeam software in the Scale ecosystem. And so we're really excited that we're building up those relationships. And before we kind of jump into it, maybe I'll hand it off to Craig just for a couple minutes to talk about the scale computing journey, kind of what your observations have been, what you've been building, and how it kind of fits into this notion of refactoring or re-architecting your HCI.
Yeah, well, let's start from the beginning. So, first of all, as you said, Brian, I've been with Scale for 15 years now. Back in 2012, Scale developed a product that at the time we were calling HC3, that's now HyperCore. It's our first HCI appliance. So, hyperconvergence in general is just kind of a combination of storage, compute, virtualization, just into an appliance-like form factor. It's really all about simplicity and kind of ease of use in that model, and that's what Scale does really well. Historically, we really focused on small and mid-sized customers, like basically any SME type of customer where you have little or no kind of specialization in any one area of the infrastructure. You kind of have generalists that are in charge of everything. And so as a result, we had to build a product that met the needs of that type of customer. You set it up, you kind of forget about it and just work on the applications themselves that you care about. Over the last decade plus of having this product in market, we've seen all sorts of interesting transitions. One of which is kind of a recent acquisition in the market that has a lot of people looking at, what portability options do I have out there? What can I use for my primary hypervisor for that infrastructure? And I would love to say that back in 2012, when we first launched this first HCI product, that we had this great vision for this opportunity that was going to happen, but really we've been kind of at it for a really long time, and all of a sudden just hit these market wins behind us. One of which being this acquisition where people are looking at a lot of changes in licensing models, a lot of changes in partnerships with those hypervisor partners out there. And then there's this other trend out there, which is really the topic of today's call, which is around edge computing. Edge computing has existed forever, right? I have a remote office or a remote place that has to have on-premises computing. And a lot of times, that remote office, branch office is a legacy application sitting out there. But what's happened in the last few years is we're seeing the adoption of AI, we're seeing the adoption of machine learning, we're seeing all these new applications that have a requirement to be run nearby the people and things that it's kind of capturing data and analyzing right there. And so those two market dynamics, I think, are the why now. So giant acquisition has people concerned about their hypervisor of choice today and what alternatives exist out in the market, of which scale computing is a great resource for that. And then you also have the second push behind it, which is, I have new applications alongside legacy applications that have to be out at the edge of my network. How am I going to manage that? And scale computing has a solution that is, really right-sized for that type of environment where you don't have IT resources to manage and care for that infrastructure.
Yeah, say a little bit more about the notion of right sizing that form factor, that infrastructure, because we've all been supporting customers for a long time who are distributed organizations. They have lots of locations. Maybe in the past they would have a server in a particular location and have to maintain that piece of equipment. Tell us get a little bit deeper on the edge form factor, the architecture, the resiliency, and kind of the simplicity of deploying and supporting that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think to answer that, let's go back like even 5 years ago of how people would architect solutions for these types of environments. It was almost entirely point solutions. It's like, all right, I've got some new application that I need to get out there, or I've got some failing thing out there at the edge of my network and I have to replace that thing. So it was whatever the application was is very tied to that physical device that they were using to deploy it. There's some challenges in the first implementation of that, like every time, especially a distributed environment like that, it's like every time you go to deploy a new application, if it's a point solution, you have to drive a truck out there, you have to manage getting that thing stood up and running. But then it's also, you're increasing the attack surface for every application that you put out there. All of a sudden you have another vector that somebody can get in and do things that you don't necessarily want them to, plus you have less control of that physical thing because it sits out at the edge of the network. The right sizing comes in a couple different ways. One, it's the consolidation of all those workloads onto a specific appliance like form factor that we provide and HCI provides in general, and kind of putting that in a centralized for that site location. You can have all the applications running on top of both those legacy applications and the newer ones that are coming out. But it's really intended to be the size that is needed for the application today, with kind of a scale out architecture to where if 2 years from now you have a need for additional resources, you can just pop on another node. And so every application you're adding to that isn't I've got to drive a truck to that site. It's I'm just going to deploy a new application. If that needs new resources, I'll send another node out to that site. Meanwhile, the application itself stays up and running, not just through that transition, but any failure that happens to happen out the edge of the network. So a drive failure, a node failure, anything like that is kind of handled seamlessly.
And you really don't even need to roll a truck to do that. You can actually just ship that appliance, plug it in, phone's home, so to speak, and the configuration's deployed and you're up and operational. So I think it's really helped organizations who are trying to figure out what the support model looks like for those workloads, those point of sale machines, whatever it is that edge compute device is supporting out there. Let me throw it over to Tim here. Obviously, data protection, data resiliency, security are all really important. And in the world that we're in and that we have to survive in today with ransomware attacks. What's Veeam's perspective in terms of protecting these highly distributed architectures and workloads that are out at the edge? How are you guys thinking about that?
Well, Brian, the first thing that comes to mind is that these things need to be protected. So our perspective, immediately, the most simple answer is we must provide a solution or a capability to protect these workloads at the edge. Our expectation is that there's a need out there. So then Veeam needs to think about what's the method that we provide? What's the product or feature set or capabilities that allow our users or our partners to then deliver that protection? And it makes me think about things like our offsite storage, um, our capabilities to interact with what we call like backup copy jobs, where you might have data that's backed up locally and we want to take it offsite. Or maybe that edge location is such that we don't have that local copy, and Veeam wants to provide a robust method to take that backup instead of landing it locally, take it away immediately on that first backup. So from our perspective, we believe there's data to be protected, and then we need to provide a capability that allows it to be done efficiently and hopefully easily. Because to Craig's point, if the edge compute solution is simple and easy to use, well, the data protection's got to be that same way, or it becomes cumbersome and challenging for the customer. And we know that when things are challenging or cumbersome, they don't get done or they can't get done. So again, from our perspective, we need to build solutions that meet the customer where they are in a way that they can implement that solution.
Yeah, and that's really where, OTAVA has been partnering with Scale a lot on establishing those data protection policies and being able to determine like how often do we want to protect the data? How do we get it to an offsite target where we can recover if need be, or how do we get it into a disaster recovery service so that, in the event that there is an attack that takes down a portion of the infrastructure, you can recover and get back and up and running very quickly. How are you thinking about, the environment that we're in, Tim, relative to cyber attacks and these bad actors really trying to get into the environment, the network, any way they can? And what's Veeam doing as far as um, isolating or identifying some of those bad actors very early in their attack or their attempt to compromise infrastructure?
Yeah, Brian, I think I said the same thing in 2020, 2021, and 2 and 3. And I think our competitors, my colleagues that work at other data protection vendors will actually say the same things, which is we continue to see an advanced level of sophistication where bad actors or malicious insiders are taking action, and they're doing things like um, they're more aggressive, they're more capable than they've ever been, and I'll probably say the same thing next year in 2026. As innovative as we are on the business side, trying to provide protection capabilities, well, we know these certain bad folks. They're also innovating in their own ways. So what's Veeam doing? Um, the first thing we started a number of years ago was to deliver immutable backup storage capabilities, where we would integrate with. First, it was the native capabilities of object storage to prevent early deletion of backup data. And we integrated that with um, the XFS uh, file system, and a little redundant there, but XFS integrating with XFS's immutability allowed us to protect this backup data, in guest as opposed to on remote object storage. So that was one big innovation. But then we needed to work, I'll say, earlier in the cycle of protecting data to understand if there's malicious activity happening inside a guest OS. So we have started to produce a couple of solutions that help our customers here. One, we are scanning backup data as we're taking it, as we're reading from this production infrastructure in order to create backup files from that. We're looking at the data we're backing up to see if we can tell if it's being encrypted, to see if the change rate is super high from what we backed up yesterday. That's an anomaly. We're using machine learning and artificial intelligence to look at these anomalies and very quickly try to make a judgment call. Is there a bad actor here? Are there tools on this system that bad actors use? Are there like links, these onion link things that bad actors leave behind? Are these there? And we're starting to identify that while we're taking a backup live. And then we're informing our users. So of course we're protecting that data, making it immutable, but we're also trying to do things like live in progress of a backup, just to inform our users, inform our partners like OTAVA that there's something going on at that infrastructure and somebody needs to take a look at this system or this file path, and because there's something not normal.
Yeah, I think it's really important for the different enterprises out there, trying to determine if they want to have a DIY approach to this and kind of consume you know scale computing or any edge solution and Veeam and kind of be in charge of the 24 by 7 um, responsibility of watching, all the notifications and alerts that Veeam can put off, or do you want to work with a managed, provider like OTAVA who has a staff that's, just dedicated to that all the time, can identify an anomaly, isolate that file system, interrogate it, test it in kind of a sandbox environment to protect the rest of the production infrastructure, and then take the appropriate course of action in terms of recovery. So that, yeah, I think those are the things that a lot of our customers are thinking about, and they're just it's overwhelming. And we stay really close to Veeam, making sure that we're you know seeing all the new software releases coming out, understanding the capabilities, because you guys are really the front line, right? You are identifying kind of the threat environments that are being developed by these bad actors and responding to them almost in real time. So it's been really a pleasure working with you and the whole Veeam team. But in terms of the infrastructure and edge in general, Craig, maybe come back around and talk a little bit about how you're seeing customers evaluate their HCI and their edge deployments, and kind of determining what, how they want to evolve that
Yeah.
infrastructure over time. Because I think what we've heard is like, hey, we already have current vendors. We're going to maybe shrink that footprint, bring in for some more of the modern workloads, deploy an edge deployment, migrate things over time. But want to get your perspective on kind of how you're seeing customers make that transition.
Yeah, I think the first thing that happens is the question of where should I run this workload? Um, does it even make sense to run on premises? We're seeing more and more workloads that require to be run on premises out at the edge of the network, and so as a result, those workloads have certain, there's an expectation that comes along with those because people are so used to running things in the cloud, or they're used to running things in a centralized data center, and those expectations are around uptime for the application itself. It's around making sure that if there is some type of failure out there, that things stay up and operational. I mean, think of a retail environment and the point of sale system going down as a good example of that, but it doesn't really matter what industry it is. There's always some application where downtime is going to be impactful to patient outcomes, as an example. The second thing is, because of that expectation that is coming from having run in the cloud or having run in a centralized data center, these are no longer kind of secondary locations. It has to be treated as primary, and along with that comes the expectation of backup and making sure that you're protected against anomalies, as Tim was talking about. It's like if there is if there's a threat actor, and let's be honest, that's the where's the where's the location they're going to try to attack. It's not going to be likely the centralized data center that has armed guards sitting out front. It's going to be at the most vulnerable spots, which typically are at the edge of the network. And so you kind of want to go into that with the idea of, I want this to be protected. I want to provide the same level of service that I do everywhere else in my infrastructure. And if I can't do that directly, perhaps do that with a managed service that has expertise in that environment.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, you're always trying to find ways to shrink the attack surface. And now that you're deploying more things out in, the network and at the edge of the network, Tim, how do you think about, reassessing um, your threat tolerance and thinking about that attack surface and managing the threat vectors against it?
Well, I'll
Lots
piggyback on
lots to
Craig's.
unpack.
I'll piggyback on Craig's example customer, like somebody in a retail scenario.
Yeah.
You you're really limited to how you can react to an issue. If your system is your point of sale system, it's like the thing you're sitting in front of and typing on. And it's my dad is always, I've always had these conversations with my dad where he mentions things like these no fail scenarios. If that is your business and that point of sale system is critical to you running your business, it's a no fail scenario that thing is up when your store is open. And if that thing is down, your store is closed. That's just the reality. So how does Veeam try to deal with that scenario? So one, if you do have this central like location, Veeam has our capability to deploy our main backup product there, and you can connect to a system out at the edge over like a VPN link, and we could drop a little Windows agent, for example, if it's running Windows, and provide this protection. But you still have to store that backup data somewhere. And so, like back to something I said earlier, we are able to evaluate the potential anomalies on that system as we're backing it up. We want to make sure that backup data is stored in a safe and secure location, maybe even offsite. Because if you're thinking about this retail location where somebody can come and unplug something or plug in, if your backup data is sitting there, they could walk away with that drive too. I mean, it's really easy, probably. And that's so different than Craig's example of the centralized data center location with armed guards. People don't walk in there and take hard drives and leave, but at a retail location they could, right? So it makes me think of this concept that we have for our offsite backups. Take them to a cloud provider like OTAVA, store it in their location, sitting there with armed guards, or take it to a hyperscaler of your choice. Similar protection concept. It gets it out of your own infrastructure, protected somewhere else with somebody's armed guards if you don't have that same level of protection.
No, that's awesome. What features are you guys working on at Veeam to kind of help some of these scenarios that's coming down the road?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go back to a question you had earlier after I give my answer. I mean, the coolest one that we're doing right now, the coolest features, we're developing support for scale hypercore, and we'll deliver that later this year. We have a beta today. I'm working with some of the team at Otava to kick the tires on this. It's really exciting times. But you asked a question earlier to Craig, like why now? Why is Scale seeing such renewed interest? And uh, we're seeing the same thing from our side. When Veeam started many years ago, we focused on a single hypervisor. It was our easiest entry point to the market. Later, we focused on a second one. We added in Hyper-V, maybe about 5 years into our work. And we've added more and more and more over time because we started to see their market share develop. We started to see that pie get carved up into more groups. And Veeam wants to be able to work with all of them. It's important to us. We're storage agnostic. It's important to us. We're hypervisor agnostic. We want to meet the customer where they're at. And what we're seeing today is there's lots of conversations in the marketplace about data portability and data protection on new and different hypervisors. And so for us, scale is new. But it's really interesting. It's really compelling to our customers. So we want to meet them where they're at. So we're developing that integration for that purpose. And um, we'll do more with other hypervisors and other storage vendors too, because it's really important that as the industry diversifies, that we do too.
Yeah, I think that's the enabler for me, or like data portability. I know it's a Veeam mantra because it allows you to kind of change out infrastructure, modernize infrastructure, look at new solutions, adopt new solutions, and still have a common thread in terms of your data protection, your data resiliency strategy. So it really creates a non-disruptive way to adopt new technology very quickly. And so that's, we've seen, when we're having those conversations out there, I think everyone in the industry is having the hypervisor conversation right now. Am I where I need to be? Where am I right now? Where do I want to be in 2 years? And so having, a partner, a data resiliency partner like Veeam just gives you optionality that, I think everyone's looking for right now. Craig, what's next on the roadmap for scale computing other than support from Veeam? What are you guys? How do you think the world of scale computing is going to look in the next 18 months?
Well, yeah, first of all, we're thrilled about the partnership with Veeam. I think in addition to what you were saying, Brian, about people looking for partners out there that give them that portability. It's like what is my path to get from where I'm at today to where I want to go? And Veeam tells a great story with that, with a fantastic product that honestly a large percentage of our customer base already uses. And so to get them to hear the story of, oh, I can keep using Veeam is really a big win for us as a company and for our customers. So we're excited about that. Building on that, I think in the edge computing space, and Brian, you touched on this a little bit earlier, when you go to deploy infrastructure, if it's in your primary data center, it's probably nearby. You're physically going to go install that thing. In remote offices, remote, at the edge of the network, whatever that means to you, it probably does not mean you have somebody sitting there. But what you'd like to do is be able to send your infrastructure there and have it stood up without having to deal with physically going there or working with a provider that's going to go on site and be your kind of hands and eyes on the keyboard. And so we support zero touch provisioning out of the box. I think the next wave of this is going to be moving up in the application stack. So we have full support for Ansible, Terraform today, but a lot of our customers are really asking us for, can you provide me infrastructure as code tools very specific to this, kind of fleet manager, hypercore, the scale computing platform products, and how do I get my applications out there? Can you help me manage the lifecycle of those applications? And of course, most of you out there are probably, if you're looking at any newer applications, you're probably not looking at VMs. Almost everything out there is getting, containerization and Kubernetes alongside with that. And so aligning with that path is really the direction we're taking the company and the product.
Yeah, and I think I've been watching some of the use cases that you guys promote, and I think it's, we're talking about data portability, but there's almost this notion, like when we're talking about edge as this static deployment that sits out in a retail outlet. But we're also, I know that you guys are talking a lot about how do you really make edge effectively a data center in a box, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you have different business models that really need to push that compute power and the performance out to what I'll just call a nomadic location, right? It may be a concert venue, and they need to have some applications that were running and at that concert venue for 3 days, and then they're going to go to the next location. And so Edge is not just an appliance at a static location, but it also gives you a lot of options to support things that were very expensive to do, or maybe
Yeah.
even impossible to do with kind of legacy infrastructure. So I think that's another great use case that we're starting to hear about more in our business, and I know that you guys are probably having those conversations as well.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a customer who literally just got out of a conversation with their CEO where the CEO came back and said, "Hey, I've got this new whiz bang AI idea I want you to implement." And the IT infrastructure team's like, I don't even know where to start with this. I now have to deploy something new. Now, fast forward 5 years from now, you have a platform in place that allows you to just kind of click a button to spin up a new workload out there. That
Yeah.
the bar for deployment becomes really low. And anytime you can lessen that kind of threshold for the value you need out of an application to justify the expense of deployment of that application, when you lower that bar, all of a sudden innovation happens. And so we're fully expecting you're going to see all sorts of new applications beyond even the hype of what we're seeing with LLMs and artificial intelligence in general and all that. I think we're about to see an explosion of applications as a result of these two factors kind of hitting at the same time.
Oh, it's awesome. So lots more to come. Really excited to be working with both of your companies. And I think we're probably at a good point to maybe open it up and see if we have some questions out there on the webinar. I think Irma, I don't know if you have the ability to help with that. I think you're coordinating a lot of this in the back end. And I'm not hearing any.
Brian, I think one of the questions I see here is, how do I know if my workloads are a fit? I'll take a first stab at that and let you all jump in. But usually there's one or two applications that are really driving the demand for needing something to run on premises. And again, sometimes it's a legacy application that's just been there forever, where again downtime for that application means downtime to the operations of that location. That is usually a really good indicator that you have a need for a platform like this or a managed service provider to provide that infrastructure for you on prem. And if it's important enough to maintain high uptime, likely I would imagine Tim be a really good candidate for backing up and making sure you're protected and all that.
Yeah, 100%, Craig. I mean, if this application is critical to the business being run, must be protected, because inevitably it's going to go down. There's going to be data loss, whether it be intentional or unintentional, malicious or accidental. I mean, everything happens, right? So of course, protect it, protect everything. Oh, overprotect your data. I've never had anyone tell me that was a bad idea. It's always the underprotected stuff that's the challenge, right?
Always. Yep.
Craig, how are you architecting HA with some of these edge deployments?
Well, so just innate in the capability of the product itself, right? If you're going to deploy maybe 3 nodes worth of our
Right.
software running on hardware, we take care of a storage layer as part of that solution to where if data is written, say on node 1, we're making sure there's a copy of that data on node 2 or node 3. So that protects against HA. That also allows us to do things like rolling updates, right? So if we have new features coming out, next version supports Veeam, everybody's going to want to upgrade to that. You just click a button, we migrate workloads off, update everything in the entire stack, migrate workloads back. And we can only really do that because of the data placement of having that what we call Scribe, Scale Computing Reliable Independent Block Engine, which is a mouthful, but fun term, Scribe, as our storage layer. That's really how we're providing it. One of the other things we didn't really get into, Brian, is just one of the things that I think really makes us a fit for the edge is the fact that we've built this storage stack for the hypervisor that we ship with the product, and it allows us to go on really small form factors. So it's really common for a customer to deploy 3 really small form factors. Think, I'm looking around the desk here, like small PC style almost form factors that provide high availability, but because of that smaller form factor at a smaller price point, you can oftentimes hit the overall infrastructure cost of a single server, but with full HA.
Yeah, and even, I'm going to jump in there, Craig, because even in those scenarios, what's cool from a Veeam perspective is, sure, a certain customer could put in additional infrastructure for local backup storage and a really powerful Veeam implementation, but they don't have to.
Hmm.
Just using a little bit of your compute on the scale side would allow customers to protect their data, ship this data off-site. They don't need a big additional array. So if the perspective of the customer is, let's keep costs down, things nimble and agile over there at the edge, you don't have to put in a big array or a big storage device there. There's lots of ways to take your data away and keep it protected and immutable, knowing that it's there when you need it, but you don't have to go and plumb in a huge piece of big iron and a 52U rack and all that kind of stuff. It's
Right.
not necessary.
Awesome. Well, listen, I think I'm watching for more questions coming in, not really seeing much, but I guess that means we did a really good job of describing the journey and edge computing, protecting your data, and deploying a rational data protection architecture that saves money, but also, maintains resiliency. So, listen, I really appreciate all of your support and your partnership with OTAVA and Veeam and Scale Computing. So thank you guys. You're great to work with. Thanks so much for everyone who attended. And we will post this in the coming days and look forward to hopefully hearing from some of the people on the webinar today. So thanks again for all of your time. And thank you to my guests, Tim and Craig. Again, appreciate your commitment to supporting OTAVA and look forward to many successful years moving forward.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome.